Welcome back to Joyfully at Home. Today we are going to be making a family favorite around here. We're going to be making pumpkin cheesecake, and since we are right in the midst of the beginning of the fall season and pumpkin spice everything is out there, I figured today we will go ahead and make a pumpkin cheesecake and show you just how easy it is to make a baked cheesecake. Now this is something that I tend to do. I like to make my own graham cracker crust for cheesecakes. I've always made my own because it's so simple and easy to do. Now, if you don't want to make your own graham cracker crust, you don't have to. You can buy graham cracker crumbs already ground up in the stores. You can buy them by the box, and that's totally fine. You can go ahead and buy them that way. I just find it easier. I always have graham crackers around the house. So you just take one package of graham crackers if you're going to make your own, and you put them in your food processor, or I'll be honest, back in the old days, I even used a rolling pin to beat them up very fine before I had a food processor. You can beat the tar out of them with a rolling pin in a Ziploc bag, and you'll get a nice fine crumb as well. But this is a lot quicker and easier. Now that I'm a little older, I've graduated to the easier methods. So you just put a full package in your food processor, and you go ahead and turn it on high just for a couple of seconds, not too long. Usually like to tap it so any crumbs that were up top, and then you can see you have a nice fine graham cracker crumb. At this point, what we'll add is 1/3 cup of sugar to your food processor. Put your lid back on and give it another whirl. That'll go ahead and blend your sugar and your graham cracker crumbs together nicely so they're evenly mixed. Now, I just take another 1/3 cup of melted butter and turn your food processor on low. And this is, again, it's another step. You can stir this into the crumb mixture if you'd like. If you don't have a food processor, you can do this right in a bowl and stir in your melted butter. And just start turning it on low and just start drizzling your butter in. Let it go for just a minute or so. And then when you take your lid back off again, you'll see your crumbs are a little clumpy. That means your butter is nicely mixed in there, and we can now press them in the bottom of our cheesecake pan. Now that your crumb mixture, as you see, has got a nice crumbly texture, that means, again, your butter is nicely incorporated. We're just going to take this mixture and can dump every bit of it right into the bottom of a 9-inch springform pan. Generally, all cheesecakes are done with a springform pan because that way you can remove the side from it once your cheesecake is done. If you, by chance, don't have a springform pan, a tip that you can do is you can go ahead and use a regular 9-inch round cake pan or an 8-inch, and you can go ahead and line it with foil, or you can line it with parchment. Either is fine, and that way you can lift your cheesecake up out of that pan when it is done and it's cool. So now all we do, I usually like to wear a glove on my hand for this just so my hands don't get messy, and it helps the crumb not to stick to your fingers. Just take that and press this down in here nice and firm. You want a nice firm crust on your cheesecake. Press it all down in there nice and tight, and then we'll be ready to start on our cheesecake filling. So now that we've got our crust in our springform pan and we've set that aside, we can work on our actual cheesecake. You're going to start off with 3 8-ounce bricks of cream cheese. I like to tend to leave these out for a good hour or so. Out of the refrigerator before you're making your cheesecake, because it helps to get the cream cheese softened up a bit. So we'll just open these up and put them right in your mixer. Sometimes they need a little help coming out of their packages. But now that you have your cream cheese in your mixer bowl, just make sure that it's all down in there nice. And we're going to go ahead and start beating this to get it to a nice soft texture. Now that you've beaten your cream cheese for about 2 to 3 minutes, it gets this really nice smooth texture. You'll want to scrape down the sides of your bowl so all your cream cheese is again in the bottom of your bowl. Now for our next ingredient, we will add a cup of sugar. And this will help sweeten up our cream cheese and get this ready for our pumpkin. We'll go ahead and we'll turn our mixer back on again and incorporate our sugar for about another 2 minutes. Now, once again, you'll scrape down your bowl after you've got your sugar incorporated into your cream cheese. And you'll notice that your cream cheese is now beginning to get a very nice creamy texture. That always is the way. Once you add your sugar, it'll become even smoother and creamier than it was beforehand. So now we will go ahead and add our pumpkin and our spices to our cream cheese and sugar mixture. So now we're going to add a cup of pure pumpkin, not pumpkin pie mix or anything like that. It just wants to be pure pumpkin. So we're going to add a cup of that to our cream cheese. And then we're going to add our spices. We're going to add ginger, half a teaspoon of ginger, 2 teaspoons of Saigon cinnamon, and a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. Now, obviously, you can adjust these spices to anything you like. If you like a little more nutmeg or you like a little more ginger in your pumpkin, even if you like cloves in your pumpkin, you can certainly do that. You can even use pumpkin pie spice in this place if you like just a blend of all of that. You can adjust it in any way to suit your taste. You can do that at this point and have it exactly to your taste. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to mix our pumpkin and our spices up into our cream cheese mixture and get that all incorporated together. Now for the very last addition to your cheesecake batter, you're going to incorporate 3 large eggs, whole eggs, to your cheesecake batter. And I generally like to do this at the end because for a couple of reasons. One, room temperature eggs incorporate better into your cheesecake batter. And so I like to let them sit out for a little bit. And the other thing is you do not want to whip your eggs into your cheesecake batter for too long. With all this extra mixing with your different flavors or anything like that, that adds extra beating to your eggs. Your cheesecake, you want your cheesecake to have a nice creamy texture, not a very fluffy whip texture. So you want to put your eggs in last and then whip them in your batter until they're just barely incorporated. You don't want to go too long on them. That will still keep your cheesecake with a nice, creamy, decadent kind of texture. And so you don't want to go ahead and beat them too long. So we'll go ahead and just beat them till they're just mixed in. And then we'll be ready to put our cheesecake batter on top of our crust. So now that you have your eggs incorporated, you can go ahead and clean off your paddle. So you make sure you get all of your cheesecake batter. Go ahead and give it an extra stir. Pull it right off your mixer. And just make sure that you go around, give it an extra stir. Make sure everything looks good and it's nice and creamy before we pour it onto our crust. So now we'll take our cheesecake batter and we will just put it right on top of our crust. You may have a couple of small cream cheese lumps here and there, and that's okay because they will melt into your cheesecake. We've been making cheesecakes for, at least 20 some years, and I've never had one that has been turned away from before. Go ahead, tap off your spatula. Make sure you got all your cheesecake batter in there. Give it a couple of taps on the counter so any air bubbles will come to the top. Now, the other reason for only whipping your eggs in at the very end is so when you bake this, your cheesecake surface doesn't crack. You want to make sure you have a nice smooth cheesecake surface when it comes out, and you don't want it to crack. So also just barely incorporating those eggs into that batter will help to keep your cheesecake from cracking. So now we'll go ahead and we'll put this in a 375-degree oven for approximately 45 to 55 minutes. And then it'll come out, and once your cheesecake comes out, you really need to allow it to just sit in this pan and cool completely. Once that's completely cool, you can refrigerate it. You can take off the outside of your springform pan by just releasing this bail here. Or if you're using a regular cake pan, you can lift it right up out, and then you can cut and serve, and you'll have the most wonderful pumpkin cheesecake that you've ever had. Now, this is how your cheesecake is going to look when it first comes out of the oven. You're going to notice it's risen a little bit, and sometimes you'll get a little slight crack around the edge, but that's just because your cheesecake has definitely risen up like it should. But you notice it's a nice smooth top, no cracks. That's from not overbeating your eggs when you add them. But you'll see this is how you can also tell that your cheesecake is done. It's just you go ahead and touch it like this and see how that you get that little bit of bounce. That means it's just set in the center. Same with the sides, you'll get a little bounce. And that's how you know your cheesecake is done. Now you'll let this sit until it completely comes to room temperature. And then you'll chill this for as long as you would like. You want to make sure it's nice and cold. And then you'll release your bail here on your cheesecake, and you can enjoy your new cheesecake all ready to set up for dessert. One other trick that I like to do, and you don't have to, but I like to do this, is take a very fine bladed knife while your cheesecake is still hot and go all the way around the outer edge. That makes sure that your cheesecake is nicely loosened from the sides when you remove this bail, so you'll not get any tearing at all from your outer edge of your pan coming off your cheesecake. It's just a little tip I've learned over the years. It's nice to loosen that edge up while it's still hot, and then as it settles, when you take that bail off, you'll get a nice clean cheesecake.